Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Coco Nomad podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, welcome. I've decided to start doing a video component of this as well because lots of people told me that they don't listen to podcasts. So I'm like, here we go. Here's some visuals. Not if you want to see my face, here it is. And my hair is getting longer for those that know me. This week's topic, though, is about a subject that is really important to me. It's personal just because of my journey and where I've been. And it became more important to talk about because of a conversation I was having with a friend of mine back home last week, experiencing a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt and frustration with the way things were going. So I wanted to talk about this one question that you may be asking yourself, and I think it's a fair time to ask it. I asked it years ago, and it's always okay to ask this question, and I'll get into some reasons why later. And that question is, should you leave the U.S.? Now, I know a lot of people, it's the only place you've ever known. It's your home. It's where your family and friends are. And so it's not an easy decision to make. It's not something that I would say should take lightly. I will delve into some alternatives as well in some future episodes as we dive into some of the details as we work through these stages. But the first topic that I wanted to tackle, sort of like an overview, share my journey, how I decided that it was time for me to leave, and the benefits there, and the questions that you can ask yourself to start on this journey, to start this process. So, my journey started years ago. My first trip abroad was in 1998, but it was very short. But in 2002, I left for a number of months. I went to Spain to study Spanish, and I really enjoyed being there, really enjoyed being abroad. I really felt more at home abroad than I did in the US. I've always grown up and felt sort of like an outcast, a little bit of an outsider for multiple reasons. And so I decided that I would try to do something a little bit different. I got a taste of it. I really liked it. I ended up returning to the U.S. for a few reasons. I didn't have a job abroad, and we'll talk about that in some future episodes. It was the importance of work. But I ended up coming back and sort of settling down. I got a house, and I thought I would make a go of it to try to do some things that were expected and sort of the normal path of living. About 6 years later, I realized that it wasn't really working out that well for me. I found myself going back and forth between the place where I bought the house, which was in my parents' hometown of Goldsboro, North Carolina, where I spent my summers and some time in school briefly, and my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. And so I was nomading back and forth between there. I would spend 2 weeks in Atlanta, 2 weeks in North Carolina. And for me, it was like my first taste of sort of like the nomad life where I didn't stay in one place constantly. So I decided at that point that I really did want to try it again, but I had these sort of obligations. I had this life in the States. I had a home, and I said, well, it would be nice to travel some, but if I'm ever going to return to that, I'm probably going to have to make some significant changes. I did another trip as a part of grad school in 2010, which was a reminder that I really did enjoy travel. I really enjoyed being abroad, and there were different places that I could go and different places that I could live. So fast forward to 2016, or actually late 2015, is when I made the decision that I was going to try the travel thing a bit again, but this was going to be a longer trip, sort of like a gap year, in which I joined a travel program called Remote Year. I was going to travel the world for 1 year, 12 months, 12 different countries, so I could really sample what was out there. And the goal was actually to still return back. I had some plans. I wanted to do some real estate investment. I wanted to open up a co-working space. I had spent a number of years between 2008, 2010, and 2015 working in various co-working spaces across the Southeast, actually a few outside of the Southeast as well. I love the concept. I love the idea of working remotely, not having to be in an office. I mean, it's pretty obvious I'm the Coco Nomad. I spend most of my time not working in an office or staying in one place. But I wanted to bring that experience to other people. So as a part of this trip, being abroad, I wanted to study all of the different co-working spaces I was in around the world, find out what works, how to create really solid community and offer good services. Well, about halfway through that remote year journey, I decided that I wanted to keep traveling, and I really didn't want to go back to the States. And so over the course of the next few years, I went back home initially. I sold a lot of my stuff, And that afforded a couple of opportunities that I'll talk about in some future videos when I start talking about ways to make money remotely, ways to make money online. And I'll talk about my first foray into that with Amazon FBA. I did some other things, but that topic is pretty detailed and it'd take a lot more time to go into. But I decided that I would just start selling some things and lower sort of my footprint back home because I wasn't there. And then it took about another 2 years before I finally decided to just rent the house out. I kind of had this thing about having someone in the house. I wanted it sold and I expressed that, but it was a situation where it was going to take some more work on the house. My house was very, very old, so over 150 years old. So I'd been making progress in doing projects while I was there, retiling, painting, doing these kinds of things, new roof, new HVAC, all of this. But in order to get it really primed and ready for like an optimal sale price, there still was some work that really needed to be done. So I was doing that little by little while I was abroad. Finally decided to just rent the house out, got a nice tenant in there, stayed in there for well over a year. He was also interested in buying the house. But then late last year in 2019, I really decided that one, I wasn't getting great ROI on the rental, which we'll talk about ROI in a second. And it was just a tie. It was a final tie. And I realized at that point, it had been 4 years. And I had only been back 3 or 4 times in the course of 4 years. I probably spent a total of 2 months in the United States in the previous 4.5 years. So I realized that there was no reason to keep these ties. So I finally sold the house. I really just unloaded it. I wanted to get rid of it really quick. So I priced it for a quick sale. I knew someone who was a real estate investor and was able to make that happen fairly quickly and move forward. So here I am today talking with this friend 4.5 years later. He's expressing some concerns for himself and his family, safety, the direction he feels like the country is going. But he has a lot of fears and uncertainty and doubt about his ability to do that and what it's going to take. So I decided I'd start a series of videos where I talk about these things, sort of help you think about what it will take and if it is the right move for you. So I wanted to start with primary principles I think that are really, really important. And the first one is critical, and it is go where you're treated best. Now, this is valid for any jobs that you have, any personal relationships that you have, any businesses that you're involved in, your own financial situation with investments to decide. Again, with my house, I was saying, I'm not getting the best ROI. I need to take my money where it's going to be treated best. I had already taken myself to where I would be treated best. And I really did notice a difference in that first year of travel being abroad. My interaction, particularly with police around the world, but just socially, was just a lot different. I described it as not walking around carrying an extra 35 pounds. I felt so much lighter, just existing day to day. There are some trade-offs, of course. Going to foreign countries is depending on where you are in the world. I've been in the past 4 or 5 years, I've probably been to 30 countries. Over half of those I've lived in for at least a month. Some of these multiple trips coming back multiple months. And that's because of the stage that I'm in right now as part of this journey of living abroad. And it, for me, it's probably going to be a bit longer than it will be for a lot of other people because, again, I am a nomad by nature. I like to move around. Other people may want to be more settled. So for you, that exploration phase may be shorter. And we'll talk about that in detail a bit later or in some future videos. But that concept I kept hearing. And I remember in particular, there's a podcast I like to listen to called The Nomad Capitalist. And he talks about this as well. He's a person that left the US years ago and started setting up businesses and a life abroad. He talks about investment ventures. He talks about getting residency and possibly a second and third passport and what it takes. He goes into great detail about this. But most of the time he talks, he's only talking from a strictly financial standpoint, talking about creating a company outside of the U.S., getting residency outside of the U.S. But that's still, that central principle applies. Go to where you're treated best. Now, that doesn't mean you're getting treated poorly where you are. Again, sometimes it's suboptimal. It may not be the best, but you'll live with it. It's like we learn, we're humans, we adapt. Even though there's a cost to that. And I realized that the calculation that I had to make, and I think a lot of people have to make, is the pain of moving, leaving, or staying is the pain of staying greater than the pain of leaving? And that's the thing you have to ask yourself. You can stay in any situation that you're in, and the question will become, can I do better? Can I improve my standing socially, financially, and in all kinds of ways? So it's important to think about that and make that decision moving forward. So the second principle is the one that was the big one for me after understanding that I needed to go where I would be treated best. And that is, you don't have to stay. There's no rule that says you have to stay in your home country. Look around you now. There are probably several people that you see, families, businesses that are started by people who have come from other countries and moved to the U.S. or your home country if you're listening from somewhere else. I walk the streets every day and I see people from other countries. I've never been to a country in the last 4.5 years, actually my entire travel life, where I haven't encountered people who are from other countries. Human beings will move around to find better situations for themselves, to improve their lives for various reasons. And that's something that you should consider as well. Just because you're from a place and you have ties to a place does not mean you have to stay. So when we talk about where we can go from here, we're going to talk about these stages that we're going to go through. And it may be 1 or 2 videos. I'm not quite sure how many videos it'll take to go through this. But starting with the stage with investigation, start to explore and see what your options are. Investigate what you can do, where you can go, what you're looking for. The next stage is the preparation stage, the things that you're going to have to do before you can even begin to make those kinds of moves. And there are a few. They're not many, but there are some solid ones that you have to do. And then the third stage is exploration. This is where I am. I'm currently in the exploration stage, and I'm probably going to be here for a while. I mean, don't be surprised. I won't be surprised if 5 years from now, I'm still in the exploration stage. Because for me personally, the goal after I started traveling was not necessarily to just live in one place. Just not my nature. Growing up, I grew up as a kid. My dad was in the Army and then the Navy. So by the time I got to college, I think by my sophomore, junior year, I could look back and I'd seen 30 different mailing addresses that I'd have in my entire life. So, and I'm sure I missed a few because I was born in Philadelphia and I don't even remember the street address that we had while we were there. So it's one of those things where for me, it's normal. For you, it may not be. So making that decision to decide to uproot, I think, is important in the investigation stage before you even get to explore. But they're not mutually exclusive. You can travel and explore the world and see other places and decide for yourself if a place may be better for you. And when we talk about the exploration stage, I'll give you some hints and some tips about how long I think you should stay and some things that I think you should do while you're there to really get a sense of a place, not just go to a place like a vacation and say, oh yeah, I really love being in Playa del Carmen, or I really like being in Limon, Costa Rica. 2 places that I've been. One of them I realized I like to visit, and the other place is I don't need to go back again. Maybe not even for vacation. So, and then that final stage is the application stage. This is when you've decided that, okay, this is a place that I want to be longer term. There are some rules on the length of visa stays that you need to think about. I have applied at some points for visas that you have to. I mean, there's a lot of privilege with an American passport. I'm just going to say that. If you're from the U.S., Europe, Canada, and Australia, a couple other places, the process for applying for visas is not as hard as for people who are coming from other nations. Quite frankly, you can do a lot with visas on arrival, and that's kind of what I've been doing, with the exception of my decision to stay at one point in Vietnam. I did apply for a year-long visa and thought I would just live in Vietnam. I really enjoyed Ho Chi Minh City, and I thought I would be there for a while. Turned out I found another place that I loved a lot too, and ended up going there instead. But that's a story for later. We'll talk about in detail. But we'll go through these stages. I'll talk about the decisions and the kinds of things that you need to be aware of and the steps that you need to take. So that being said, if you like the video, click like. And if you want to get a reminder, click subscribe and hit the bell so that you'll get a reminder when the next video comes out. I'm going to try to get these out as quickly as possible, as much as I can do with my day job, because I do some videos where I talk about that kind of stuff too, my work. And I think some people would be interested in the different ways that I have either tried or am trying to make a living and a life abroad, which is what I'm all about. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the comment section. I can add them to the future videos, maybe even make a particular video to address a concern or question that you may have if it's a really robust topic. If I know about it, there's going to be some things that I don't have as much experience with. For instance, if you have children and you're thinking about moving your family, I have friends and I've talked a lot with people who are traveling with family, traveling with kids, and getting into like homeschooling and or world schooling their kids, what I think is a really, really great concept. And it's something that can really benefit your children. But for like really in-depth details and an experiential perspective, that's really going to take someone who's actually doing it, not someone who just has friends. I can point you in the right direction, but I can't tell you what it's like to actually have lived that. For the other pieces of travel, I can absolutely do that because this is something I have been doing now for about 5 years and a lot of different places around the world. So stick around, comment, like, subscribe, hit that bell. I really appreciate it. And for the people on the podcast, I'll talk to you next week.